Rowan's first snow. The moment I couldn't stop laughing. Some mornings don't look important at all. The sky is a plain, washed-out gray. The coffee's lukewarm. The to-do list is already too long. And then a bobcat cub puts one paw into snow for the very first time in his life. And everything changes. That's where I want to start with you. Picture a small wildlife center tucked into the foothills of northern Colorado. Nothing fancy. A gravel drive, a couple of modest barns, a line of wire fencing tracing the edge of a snowy field. It's early. The kind of early where the world hasn't quite decided what kind of day it wants to be. And at the edge of a wooden doorway stands Rowan. Rowan is a young bobcat cub, all tufted ears and unsure paws, staring at the yard like someone swapped the world out overnight. Yesterday it was frozen dirt and dry grass. Today, it's a clean white sheet pulled tight over every bump and path he thought he knew. I'm standing just a few feet away, beside Daniel, the rehabber who's been caring for Rowan since he arrived at Snow Ridge Wildlife Center. Daniel pushes the gate open a little wider, and cold air rolls in, carrying that sharp, quiet smell of winter. He doesn't say much at first. He just watches. Rowan leans forward, nose twitching. You can almost see him arguing with himself. Curiosity wins. It usually does with bobcats. He lifts one paw, holds it there in the doorway, and then, slowly, lowers it into the snow. The reaction is instant. The cold hits his toes, and his entire body does this surprised little hop, like he's been gently zapped. His back legs scramble, his tail puffs out, and for a split second, he looks deeply offended that the ground could do something like that without warning him first. I start to laugh. Not the kind of laugh you give a joke you've heard twice already, the kind that sneaks up from the chest, that warm, helpless kind of laughter older folks sometimes get when they watch a toddler discover ice for the first time. It's not cruel. It's just pure delight at a small soul meeting a brand new piece of the world. Rowan, of course, is not finished. He tries again, because that's who he is. This time, he steps with both front paws. They sink a little, his weight shifts, and suddenly his back paws can't find anything to hold on to. He slides forward in the slowest, most dramatic belly glide you can imagine. Eyes wide, ears flared, little claws scrabbling at the white, as if he's hoping there's a stop button hidden in there somewhere. Daniel exhales through his nose, this soft, incredulous sound. And then he starts laughing too. The same man who spends his evenings with spreadsheets and vet reports is now doubled slightly at the waist, one gloved hand on the fence, chuckling like he hasn't done in a long time. Rowan comes to rest a few feet out in the yard, blinking, as if trying to decide whether he's survived some epic ordeal or just performed the most embarrassing stunt of his short bobcat career. There's something quietly familiar in that moment. You can probably feel it, even if you've never set foot in Colorado or seen a bobcat cub in your life. That feeling of thinking you understand the ground beneath you, taking one more step, and suddenly everything is slipperier than you expected. For Daniel, it lands deeper than a funny animal clip. Last winter, he tells me later, he stood in this same spot with no cubs at all, just an empty yard, a file folder of intake reports, and a long stretch of quiet that didn't feel peaceful so much as heavy. There had been health scares, long drives to check on an aging parent, bills that came in thicker envelopes than donation checks ever did. This year, the worries haven't vanished. The car still needs work. The center still runs on tight margins and handwritten thanks. But on this morning, all of that takes a step back, while a bobcat cub tries to negotiate a 1-inch snowdrift and loses. And somehow, the laughter that spills out of him in that cold air doesn't feel like escape. It feels like oxygen. If you've ever had a day where the news was too loud, or your own thoughts wouldn't quite quiet down, you might know that feeling too. That one small, unscheduled moment that loosens something inside you. A grandchild mispronouncing a word, a neighbor's dog chasing its own shadow, a bobcat cub sliding on his belly, then popping his head up as if to say, "Did anyone see that?" Right there, Rowan looks back at the doorway. He could retreat. He could run for the straw and stay where the world is predictable. Instead, he gathers himself, tucks his paws under just a little better, and stands up again. The snow is still strange. The yard is still unknown. But he's not done with it. And that, I think, is why this scene stays with me long after the laughter fades. Because, yes, it's funny. I truly couldn't stop laughing. But underneath the comedy, there's something quietly brave happening in that small Colorado yard. A young bobcat meeting winter head-on, and a tired human letting that bravery thaw a part of him he didn't realize had gone numb. In a minute, we're going to step away from this doorway and look around at the fences, the worn signs, the crowded little office where Daniel keeps this whole place running. You'll see the world that sits just outside the frame of this first snow day, and why a moment like this means so much more than just a clip on a screen. For now, if Rowan's clumsy first step into the white already made you smile, you can stay right here with us. Take a breath. Watch his paws sink. Watch him try again. This is where the story begins. Before Rowan takes his second brave, clumsy step into the snow, I want to step you somewhere else for a moment. Not out in the yard, but just inside the door. Into the quiet world behind that laugh you just heard. This is Daniel's world. The warmth hits you first. Not cozy, exactly, but warmer than the yard. A small electric heater hums in the corner of the office at Snow Ridge Wildlife Center. The room is narrow, a little crowded. There's a metal desk pushed against the wall, its paint worn down at the edges. A coffee mug sits near the keyboard, half full, forgotten long enough for a thin film to form on top. And the wall is a whiteboard. It's covered in colored markers and smudged fingerprints. Morning feeding, noon meds, vet check for the young hawk on Friday. A note to reorder syringes was squeezed into a corner. At the very bottom, someone, probably Daniel, has scribbled in smaller writing, "Remember to breathe." Next to the desk, there's a stack of envelopes. Some are plain, some carry the look you recognize the moment you hit your own mailbox. Medical offices, utilities, insurance. One is a reminder for a follow-up appointment that Daniel's been putting off. Another, with a different logo, holds the latest bill for the center's winter heating. On top of the pile, almost as if it was placed there on purpose, is a thin envelope with a handwritten return address and a small check from a local family that wrote, "For the bobcats," in the memo line. This is the balance Daniel lives in every day. One envelope heavy with worry, another light with hope. He moves through the office in that quiet, efficient way people develop when they've been responsible for more than themselves for a long time. He flicks on a lamp over the desk, checks his email, and glances at the calendar on the wall. There's a circled date a few weeks back when he drove 3 hours to sit with his mother at a specialist's appointment. There's another small note reminding him to call and check how she's sleeping in the colder weather. Last winter, on a morning much like this, the yard outside was empty. No bobcat cubs, no first snow adventures, just Daniel, a clipboard, and the sound of wind rattling the old barn roof. He remembers standing at the window, watching the snow pile up on the empty enclosures, feeling like the world had pressed the mute button on anything joyful. He'd stayed late in that office, leaning over paperwork, shoulders tight, thinking about retirement accounts and interest rates, and the way his chest felt tighter climbing the stairs than it used to. He didn't talk about it much. People who take care of animals, and people, often don't. They just keep going. This winter, the paperwork is still here. The health scare hasn't magically disappeared. The aging parent still needs rides and reminders. The donations still come in slowly and small, in crumpled bills and modest checks. Snow Ridge Wildlife Center is very real, held together by tape and grit, and the kindness of strangers who send $20 when they can. But something else is here now, too. Out past the window, there's Rowan, a bobcat cub meeting snow for the first time, turning the yard into a stage for awkward, hilarious, completely honest living. And that changes the way this office feels. A good example of that shift happens in a single, small moment. Daniel is finishing a call with the vet about a minor procedure for one of the older resident animals. He thanks them, sets the phone down, and his eyes flick to a notice from his own doctor about follow-up tests. For a heartbeat, you can see his jaw tighten. That familiar adult mix of, "I'll deal with it later," and I can't afford to ignore this. He rests his hand on the back of the chair, takes one steady breath, and then he hears it. A strange, muffled scrabble and a short, startled chirp from outside. He steps to the window. There's Rowan, halfway through his first slide across the snowy yard, paws splayed, eyes huge, looking like someone just swapped the rules of gravity on him. Daniel's face changes. The worry doesn't vanish, but it loosens. His shoulders drop a little. The corner of his mouth lifts. He lets out that low laugh you heard, the one that sounds almost surprised to find itself in his own throat. For someone watching from far away, on a phone or a TV, this might look like a simple, cute moment with a bobcat. For Daniel, it's more like a pressure valve opening. A reminder that even with bills stacked on the desk and appointments circled on the calendar, there are still mornings when life puts something wonderful right in front of him and says, "Here, just enjoy this for a minute." If you've ever paused halfway through paying your own bills to smile at a grandchild's photo, or set down a prescription bottle to listen to a favorite song, you know that feeling. It's not that the hard things disappear. It's that, for a breath or two, they have to step aside. That's what Rowan is doing for Daniel on this snowy morning. And quietly, that's what Rowan might be doing for you, too. As Daniel reaches for his coat hanging by the door, the camera catches one more detail. A faded sign taped near the frame, letters worn from being touched too many times. Thank you for helping us give wild hearts a second chance. It's crooked, a little tired, but true. He pulls the coat on, pats the pocket where he keeps a small notebook of daily observations. Feeding times, weight changes, notes about the bobcat's behavior in the snow. Then he steps back out into the cold, toward the yard where Rowan, and soon Willow and Tucker, are rewriting what this winter will feel like. In a moment, we're going to follow him there. We'll leave the envelopes, the whiteboard, the humming heater behind, and look more closely at 3 young bobcats trying to figure out what this strange white world is. Before we do, if any part of Daniel's morning feels familiar, if you've got your own stack of papers, your own quiet worries humming in the background, you're welcome to carry them with you, but set them down for a while. Come stand with him in the snow. Let the next small scene do for you what Rowan just did for him. Make you forget, just for a bit, how heavy everything felt when the day began. If you stay at the doorway just a little longer, you realize Rowan isn't alone in this strange white morning. There are 3 little souls learning winter today, not one. Rowan stands in the opening first, of course. He's closest to the snow, whiskers forward, tail flicking like he's trying to drum up his own courage. But just behind him, half in shadow, are the other 2 bobcat cubs, Willow and Tucker. The gate of the run is open. The yard at Snow Ridge Wildlife Center lies in front of them, quiet and bright. Fresh snow covers everything in a clean, unmarked layer, except for a few boot prints where Daniel crossed earlier to check the fence. You can hear the distant rush of a county road. But here, inside the wire, it's mostly just the sound of breathing and the soft buzz of the overhead lines. 3 young bobcats. 3 very different first steps. Rowan goes first again, just like before. He leans into the cold air, ears up, and drops one paw into the snow. It sinks. He wobbles, then commits anyway, stepping out with all 4 feet. His body does that little sideways dance, clumsy and determined, as he tries to remember how balance works on a surface that suddenly gives way under him. Willow stays half a body length behind him, close enough that her whiskers almost brush Rowan's shoulder. She stretches her neck forward, sniffing, as if she'd like to send only her nose out to explore, and leave the rest of her safely tucked inside. She watches him slip, watches him catch himself, and you can almost see the calculation happening. If Rowan can survive that strange slide, maybe she can risk a paw too. Tucker hangs off to one side. He tries to look casual about it, like he's not waiting to see how this turns out. But his paws are rooted to the dry floor of the run. His eyes dart from Rowan to the snow and back, as if he's checking whether the ground has some hidden rule he hasn't been told yet. Daniel stands a few feet away in the yard, knees bent a little, hands loose at his sides. He doesn't call out instructions. he just offers something steadier. Presence. You can hear his boots creak as he shifts his weight, ready to move if any of them need help. Rowan makes it 2 steps into the snow before his back feet decide to head in different directions. For one breathless second, he looks like a tiny, spotted pretzel. Then he slides, belly low, leaving a shallow trail behind him, an uneven line drawn across the clean white. The sight is funny enough to make you smile, but something else happens at the same time. When Rowan slips, Willow flinches, her body tenses, claws hooking the wooden threshold. Tucker's tail jerks. His head lifts a little higher. They feel his misstep as their own warning. Wilson's first step is quieter. She lowers one paw, very slowly, into a boot print Daniel left earlier. It's an easy thing to miss, but it matters. She chooses the place where a larger, heavier foot has already pressed the snow down. It's not just ground. It's ground that someone she trusts has tested. Her toes meet the cold, and she pauses. She doesn't leap back. She doesn't tumble. She stands there, half in and half out, breathing in the newness. Then, carefully, she brings the other front paw into the next print. She's still in the same snow as Rowan. She's just using a different path to meet it. Tucker's first step is an argument with his own pride. He watches Rowan slide, and Willow choose the safe track. He glances once toward Daniel, then away, as if to say, "I've got this," even though no one asked. He puts one paw into fresh snow beside the boot marks, not wanting to look like he needs the help. The snow holds. He takes another step, higher, almost theatrical, trying to make it look easy. On the third step, his paw goes a little too deep. His front end drops, his back end tries to stay tall, and the result is a slow, slightly ridiculous forward fold. He ends up sitting in the snow with his hind legs splayed out in front of him, like someone sat down in a chair that wasn't actually there. There's a beat of silence, and then Daniel laughs. It's not loud. It's not at their expense. It's the kind of laugh people in their 50s and 60s recognize. The one that comes when you see your younger self in someone else's awkward moment. Because if we're honest, we've all been one of these 3. We've had Rowan days, charging into something new with more courage than caution, only to find ourselves sliding sideways, hoping someone steady is watching the edges. We've had Willow days, inching forward, letting someone else test the ice first, stepping into the footprints of people who seem to know more than we do, breathing a little too fast as we try. And we've had Tucker days, when we tried to look composed and capable on ground that didn't feel stable at all, only to end up sitting right down in the middle of it. Dignity, a little bruised, but heart very much still beating. As the 3 bobcat cubs take those first steps, you can see that this isn't just some random slapstick show. It's 3 small lives building their own stories. Rowan is already learning that snow doesn't behave on command. Willow is learning that she can follow and still be brave. Tucker is learning that falling isn't the end of the world, even when it happens right in front of someone else. Daniel notices it too, in his own quiet way. He crouches down, letting his knees sink into the snow, and calls softly. Not with fancy words, just simple encouragement. A low murmur for Rowan, a barely audible, "That's it," for Willow, a half smile and a gentle, "You're okay, bud," for Tucker, as the cub gathers himself and tries again. It's a simple thing, this scene. 3 bobcats, a fence, a modest wildlife center yard in winter. But for anyone watching who's lived long enough to see plans go sideways, to feel unsure on ground that used to feel solid, it can feel strangely personal. In a moment, we are going to step back even further and talk about how these 3 ended up here at all. How construction noise, a cardboard box, and a stranger's decision brought them to Snow Ridge's gate. That story gives weight to this snowy play, shows why every slip and every steady step matters. But before we go there, if you see a bit of yourself in one of these first steps, Rowan, Willow, or Tucker, you're welcome to quietly claim them. Maybe just hold their name in your mind. Maybe share it in a comment later if that feels right. But now, just stay with them in the snow as we turn gently toward the story the center doesn't put on its sign. If you just tuned in now, You might think this story starts with 3 bobcat cubs and their first snow. But like most good things in life, this morning in the yard is actually Chapter 2. Chapter 1 began on a much less beautiful day. It was late fall in northern Colorado, the kind of gray afternoon that makes everything along the highway look a little worn out. A road crew was packing up for the evening on a 2-lane stretch not far from Snow Ridge Wildlife Center. Snow dusted the shoulders, but hadn't really settled yet. Machines were cooling down, orange cones were lined up, and most folks were thinking about dinner, not wildlife. That's when one of the crew leaders noticed a cardboard box. It was tucked near the tree line, just off the gravel, in that spot where people sometimes leave things they don't want to deal with anymore. An old couch cushion, a broken chair. This time, it was a box with air holes punched in the sides, and a folded note taped to the top. He walked over, probably expecting junk. Instead, when he leaned close, he heard it. A thin, high sound that didn't belong to the wind or the trucks. A chirp, then another. The box shifted. Inside were 3 bobcat cubs, smaller than they look in the snowy yard today, ears too big for their bodies, eyes a little crusted from the cold. Whoever left them had tried, in their own imperfect way. There was a towel, a shallow dish that had tipped over, some cheap dry food that wasn't right for them. The note on the lid only said, "Found alone by the site. Please help." There are a lot of ways that moment could have gone. People are tired at the end of a workday. It's easy to think, not my problem, and keep driving. But this man didn't. He called his supervisor. The supervisor called the non-emergency line, and before the sun dropped completely, Daniel's phone was ringing at Snow Ridge. This is the part Snow Ridge doesn't put on its sign. It doesn't list the late-night calls or the miles driven with a crate in the back, heart thumping because you don't know what you'll find. It doesn't show you Daniel in the passenger seat of a volunteer's pickup that evening, watching the headlights cut through the dark as they followed the directions the crew gave them. When they pulled up, the box was waiting. The crew leader was still there, hands in his pockets, breath white in the cold. No cameras, no applause, just a quiet man who didn't want to leave 3 frightened animals alone at the edge of a work site. Daniel lifted the lid in the truck's headlights and met 3 sets of scared eyes for the first time. Rowan, Willow, Tucker. He didn't know their names yet. He just knew they were too young to be out there without a mother and too wild to be kept in someone's garage. That's the thin line Snow Ridge walks every day, stepping in only when nature has already been pushed too far. Back at the Wildlife Center, the story continued in a small exam room that smells faintly of antiseptic and pine shavings. The cubs were checked for injuries, warmed up and weighed. They were hydrated carefully. Notes went up on the whiteboard. Intake times, estimated ages, and possible causes. Maybe their den was disturbed by the construction. Maybe their mother was hit on that same road. The full truth, only the mountains know. And this is where the ethics quietly come in. Daniel talks about it often, though not in lectures, just in simple sentences over coffee or while cleaning enclosures. Bobcats are wild animals. They don't belong in living rooms or backyards on chains. However cute a bobcat cub might be, trying to keep one as a pet usually ends with someone hurt, or the animal dropped at a door like this. A place like Snow Ridge exists to stand in the gap, to give wild hearts a second chance when human activity has already taken the first one away. The goal is not to make them tame. It's to give them enough time, enough care, and enough respect that they can someday live as bobcats should, either back in the hills if they're fit for release, or in a safe, enriched sanctuary if they're not. You can see that philosophy in the small details of the center. In the faded donation jar by the office door, with a few crumpled bills and coins inside. In the way the enclosures are built to mimic rock outcrops in brush, not circus cages. In the white, there's even a reminder scrawled under their schedule. We love them by letting them stay wild. For many people in their 50s and 60s, that idea resonates in a way that goes beyond animals. Learning when to step in and when to step back, helping without smothering, offering safety without taking away someone's nature. It's something parents, grandparents, caregivers, and neighbors know by feel. even if they've never thought about it in terms of a bobcat. When you see Rowan tumbling in the snow, or Willow inching her way along Daniel's footprints, or Tucker pretending he's braver than he is, it's easy to forget they almost didn't make it to this yard. There was a cardboard box at the edge of a road, and a decision someone had to make. Ignore it, or call for help. But their choice is written into every dunk of a paw into snow, every cautious step across the yard at this wildlife center. In the next part of this story, you'll see how quickly a playful morning can tilt toward real worry when the snow gets deeper than expected. You'll watch what happens when laughter suddenly carries a threat of fear through it, and how rescue work is always balanced between joy and risk. Before we go there, if you've ever been the one to pick up the phone or drive across town, or do the small, practical thing that kept a bad situation from getting worse, you're quietly part of stories like this too. If you'd like, you can leave a simple thank you in your heart, or in the comments for the folks who stopped for a cardboard box on a cold Colorado road. Now let's go back to the yard and see what happens when 3 curious bobcat cubs meet a patch of snow that doesn't know it's supposed to be harmless. It only takes one step too far for a perfect winter morning to change its tone. Out in the Snow Ridge yard, that moment arrives faster than anyone expects. The bobcat cubs have reached the easy part of the day, or at least it looks that way. Rowan has discovered that if he hops just right, he can spray a little arc of snow with his front paws. Willow is following the shallow tracks Daniel made earlier, testing each one before she commits. Tucker, still a little offended by his earlier tumble, has settled for moving at a careful trot, trying not to draw attention to himself. Copper, the older dog, wanders a lazy loop around them, tail swaying, leaving big, confident paw prints. If you were just glancing through the fence, you'd see nothing but comedy and light. But snow has its own opinions, particularly when the wind has spent all night quietly reshaping it. Along the far edge of the enclosure, where the fence meets a line of scrub and an old, half-buried log, the snow lies deeper than it does in the center of the yard. From a distance, it looks the same. Smooth, soft, inviting. To a bobcat cub, who's only known 2 inches of fluff so far, it might as well be a cloud. Rowan notices it first. He stops mid-hop, head turning toward that untouched patch. The camera catches the way his body stills, the way his ears angle forward. This is the kind of curiosity bobcats are born with. In the wild, it's how they learn where to hunt and where to hide. Here, it's what pulls him toward that innocent-looking drift. Daniel sees his focus change. He shifts his weight, boots creaking in the snow. "Easy, buddy," he calls softly, not quite alarmed yet. "That's plenty for today." Rowan doesn't speak human, of course. He just hears a sound behind him and chooses the snow in front instead. He gathers up his courage the way he's done all morning, bunching his hind legs, and then springs forward into the deep patch with a kind of determined joy that makes you want to cheer for him. For half a heartbeat, it's beautiful. Then the surface gives way. Instead of landing on something firm, Rowan drops. The snow collapses around him like a broken meringue. 1 second he's there, small and spotted against the white. The next, he's gone. The only sign of him is a fresh, uneven hole and a spray of powder hanging in the air. This is where the laughter stops. You hear it in Daniel's voice before you see it on his face. His tone sharpens as he calls Rowan's name again, already moving. His boots hit the ground harder now. The calm, careful walk becomes a run. Copper races ahead, barking once, then twice. That urgent, clipped sound dogs use when they know something isn't right. Willow freezes, body folded low, eyes locked on the place where Rowan disappeared. Tucker darts forward on instinct, then stops abruptly as his paws slide. He sits down hard, torn between wanting to help and not knowing how. The camera stays close on the snow as Daniel reaches the drift and drops to his knees. His gloves disappear into the powder as he pushes it aside in big, clumsy armfuls that have none of the smooth rhythm he uses for his daily chores. This isn't chore work. This is fear. For a breath or two, there's nothing, just white. Just the sound of snow moving and Copper's paws digging furiously alongside him. Then a small wet nose breaks the surface. A paw. One wide, blinking eye. Rowan is there, wedged in a hollow formed by the old log under the drift. Snow packed around his sides. He's not far down, but from where Daniel kneeled, those few inches might as well have been a canyon. Daniel hooks an arm under the cub, lifting gently, brushing snow from his face in quick, careful strokes. Rowan's whole body trembles, not just from cold, but from the shock of it, the sudden darkness, the moment of not knowing which way was up. There's a kind of silence that follows a scare like this. Older listeners know it well. It's the silence after the near miss on the highway, or the phone call that turned out to be just a check-in instead of bad news. Your heart is still hammering, but the crisis has passed. You're half relieved, half shaky. You can see that in Daniel's shoulders as he holds Rowan against his chest for a second longer than he strictly needs to. He doesn't make a big speech. He just lets the cub feel the rhythm of his breathing, lets his own pulse slow down enough that Rowan's can follow. From a wildlife perspective, moments like this are exactly why supervised first snow matters for bobcat cubs in a center like Snow Ridge. In the mountains, a bobcat mother would teach her young where the ground is safe, how to test a drift with their weight, when to trust a crust of ice, and when to walk around. Here, those lessons are borrowed from humans and from older animals like Copper. Daniel knows that part of his job is to let them explore. Another part is to stay close when the snow hides more than it shows. He turns Rowan gently so Willow and Tucker can see him. Willow takes a cautious step closer, nose quivering, then presses her forehead briefly against Rowan's shoulder before backing away. Tucker hovers behind her, eyes softer now, his earlier bravado replaced by a quiet sort of concern. The yard is the same. The snow is the same. But everything feels a little different for a minute. If you've lived long enough, you've probably felt that shift yourself. 1 minute, you're laughing at a joke in the kitchen. Next, the pot on the stove boils over, or the phone rings with a tone that makes your stomach drop. Life does this. It slides from light to heavy and back again, without asking our permission. What rescue work teaches, and what mornings like this whisper to anyone watching, is that both can exist in the same day. Laughter and vigilance, joy and caution. You don't have to choose one to honor the other. In a moment, the yard will settle. Daniel will guide the cubs back to a shallower, sunnier patch of snow. Copper will flop down nearby like an old guardian, and everything will slow into a kind of snow globe stillness. We'll spend some time there with them, breathing along with 3 small chests, rising and falling, letting the quiet do its work. Before we move into that softer part of the day, if you're watching this with your own recent scare still sitting in your ribs, a health result, a close call on the road, a moment that jolted you awake, you're welcome to lay it down for a bit. You might even write "safe" or "still here" somewhere, just for yourself, as a small reminder. For now, stay with Daniel in that yard, one hand on Rowan, snow on his knees, feeling his heart rate come back to earth as the snowflakes drift more slowly again. That's where we'll pick up next, in the quiet after the scare, where healing has room to breathe. There's a moment, right after the scare, when the whole yard feels like someone picked up a snow globe, shook it hard, and then set it gently back down. Everything is still. Not empty, just still. Daniel has moved Rowan, Willow, and Tucker away from the deep drift of the fence. They're in a shallow, sunlit corner of the Snow Ridge Wildlife Center yard now, where the snow only reaches halfway up their legs, and the wind doesn't bite as sharply. Copper settles nearby, folding himself into the snow with the quiet confidence of someone who has seen more winters than he can count. For the first time all morning, nobody is trying to be brave, or first, or funny. Rowan stands with his paws planted a little wider than before, feeling the ground, making sure it holds. Willow is close enough that her whiskers almost touch his shoulder. Tucker has found a small dip in the snow and eased himself down into it. Not in defeat this time, but with a kind of honest tiredness. If the earlier scenes were the comedy of this bobcat story, this is the close-up. The camera lingers on small things, the way Rowan's sides rise and fall more slowly with each breath. The tiny fog of air that leaves Willow's nose and curls away in the cold. The snowflakes clinging to Tucker's fur, melting one by one where his body gives off warmth. Above them, the light has changed. The sharp morning brightness has softened into something more forgiving. You can still hear the distant rush of the county road, but it feels a mile farther away. Between the fence posts, flakes drift down slowly. Not in a storm now, but in a steady, gentle curtain. This is when Daniel does something that doesn't look like much on camera. He stops moving. He doesn't rush to squeeze a chore into the quiet. He doesn't reach for his phone. He just lowers himself onto an old stump near the edge of the yard, plants his boots in the snow, rests his forearms on his knees, and lets his own breathing match the pace of the cubs. For a man who spends most days juggling feeding schedules, vet calls, and the unseen math of keeping a place like this afloat, that simple act is bigger than it seems. As he watches them, he starts to talk, in that low, calm voice you only really hear when someone feels safe. He explains, almost to himself, that in the wild, young bobcats would usually learn about snow from their mother. She'd choose where they step. She'd show them how to test the crust with their weight before they leap. She'd teach them that stillness isn't just laziness. It's survival. A bobcat that wastes energy in deep winter doesn't last very long. Rowan, Willow, and Tucker don't have that teacher. For now, they have Daniel, Copper, and this yard. He points gently to their paws. You notice how wide they look when they spread their toes, how the fur between them makes a kind of natural snowshoe. He explains that bobcats have thick winter coats that trap pockets of air close to their skin, keeping them warm even when their outer fur is dusted in frost. He nods toward their tracks too, those soft, round impressions in the snow. If you ever see prints like that walking away from you, he says, you're probably not in danger. You're just lucky enough to know a wild cat passed through before you. There's something disarming about hearing that kind of simple, factual information in such a quiet moment. It reminds you that even while your heart is smoothing itself out after the scare, you're learning. You're not just watching cute bobcat cubs. You're understanding a little more about how wild animals make it through winter, one measured step at a time. And if you listen underneath the facts, there's a softer message. These bobcats don't feel guilty for stopping. They don't apologize for needing a pause. They have a scare, they survive it, and then they stand still and breathe until their bodies tell them it's okay to move again. Most people in their 50s and 60s have lived enough life to know how rare that is for us. We're good at pushing, at powering through, at filling every quiet with noise or news or one more task, but not always so good at simply sitting in the snow, metaphorically or literally, until our heart rate comes down. Watching Rowan blink slowly as a flake lands on his ear, seeing Willow tilt her head back to follow the drifting pattern of snow, noticing Tucker let his eyes close for a few seconds with Copper's steady warmth beside him, it can feel like a kind of invitation. Not from a self-help book, from three bobcat cubs who know nothing about calendars or deadlines. They know cold, warmth, hunger, and safety. And right now, all of those needs are met, so they rest. They let the world be what it is for a minute, without trying to wrestle it into anything else. If you're willing, you can borrow that. Maybe right now, as you watch this, you let your shoulders drop just an inch. Maybe you match your breathing to Rowan's. Slow in, slow out. You don't have to make a big thing of it. No special music, no perfect posture. Just an honest, human pause, while three wild hearts model it for you in the snow. From this stillness, something new is going to grow. In the next part of our story, you'll see how Rowan, Willow, and Tucker don't stay frozen in this moment. They use it. They step out of it with a little more wisdom in their paws, a little more respect for the snow, a little more trust in themselves and in each other. The play returns, but it's different, deeper, braver in a quieter way. Before we walk with them into that next chapter, from fear and stillness into a more confident kind of joy. If this little snow globe pause has eased something in you, even slightly, you're welcome to acknowledge it. Maybe with a word like breathe in the comments later, or maybe just by taking one extra slow inhale before you move on. For now, Stay here a beat longer. Watch the bobcats do the rarest thing in our busy world. Nothing at all. On purpose. Then we'll follow them as they turn this hard-won calm into courage. There's a quiet moment after the scare and the stillness, when you can almost feel the day decide what it wants to be. It could end right there. 3 shaken bobcat cubs, a careful retreat, everyone back inside to dry off. But Snow Ridge has one more chapter planned for this winter morning, and it starts with a single, small choice to try again. Rowan is the first to move. He lifts one front paw out of the shallow snow, holds it there as if listening to it, then sets it down in a new spot. Not a leap this time, not a dramatic pounce, just a step. Willow watches from inches away. Tucker peeks over the little ridge he's sunk into, ears forward, attention caught. Daniel stays on his stump for another breath. He's not pushing them. He's just there, letting them decide whether they're done for the day or not. Rowan takes another step. You can see the difference if you've been with him since the start of this bobcat snow adventure. Earlier, his body was a coil of reckless energy, all spring and skid. Now there's caution in the way he places his paws, but also a new kind of confidence. He presses down lightly before shifting his weight. He checks for depth without panicking. He's learning that snow doesn't always keep its promises, but that he can adapt when it doesn't. Willow feels the shift, her foot letting his boot marks tell her where the ground would hold. This time, she doesn't head straight for the safe tracks. She circles a few inches to the side, nose low, testing the untouched powder. When she finds a spot that feels right, she places her paw there before looking back. It's a small thing, but for a cautious bobcat, it's a quiet act of leadership. Tucker is the last to rise, and there's something different about him too. Moreover, he kept trying to look composed, to move like winter didn't intimidate him at all. Pride took the lead, even when his paws didn't quite agree. Now, after watching Rowan disappear for that brief, frightening second, and seeing him come back, Tucker seems to understand that pretending doesn't actually keep you safe. He stands up, shakes the snow from his fur, and instead of strutting out into the middle of the yard, he takes a few measured steps straight toward Copper. Copper, who's been lying nearby like the old anchor of the yard, lifts his head and watches him come. Tucker pauses just long enough to brush his side along Copper's shoulder, borrowing a little of that settled, dogged calm, then turns and follows Rowan and Willow at a gentler pace. You can think of this whole next stretch as 3 tiny arcs happening at once. Rowan edges toward a small slope he slid down earlier. He pauses at the top, testing it with one paw, then another. This time he doesn't launch himself blindly, but he doesn't avoid it either. He lets gravity pull him into a slow, controlled glide. Halfway down, he adjusts his stance, tail acting like a little rudder. It's clumsy, but it's deliberate. He reaches the bottom, stops, and looks back up as if to say, I can do this now. Willow, encouraged by his controlled slide, tries a smaller version on a gentler incline. Her movements are precise, almost dainty, like she's tracing the snow with her feet instead of just plowing through it. Every successful step seems to write a quiet sentence down her spine. You can handle more than you thought. Tucker finds his own path. Instead of chasing drifts or trying to match Rowan's hops, he falls in behind Copper's tracks, placing his paws in the wide, easy impressions the older dog leaves. It's not flashy. It won't make anyone gasp, but it's honest. For a bobcat who spent the first half of the day trying to impress, that's a bigger change than it looks. Daniel sees all of this, and in a low voice, he names what he sees. Not for the camera, really, but for the animals, and maybe a little for himself. That's it, Rowan. Slow and steady. You're figuring it out. Willow, look at you, taking your own route. Tucker, yeah, that's okay. You don't have to go faster than you need to. For viewers who've made it past 50, those words land in a particular way. Life teaches you, sometimes the hard way, that the first reaction to something new, fear, bravado, hesitation, doesn't have to be the final one. You're allowed to adjust.
You're allowed to grow into a different response.
This is where the day widens out a bit.
As the bobcat cubs explore, Daniel talks softly about what might come next for them.
If they stay healthy, if their wild instincts stay sharp, there may be a day, months from now, when these winter training yards give way to something bigger. A quiet hillside, brush and rock, meltwater running under the snow.
Print by print, they'll learn where the real world holds and where it doesn't.
And if release isn't in their future, if an injury or early imprinting makes them unfit for the wild, Snow Ridge and centers like it will shift their goal.
It won't be about sending them out, but about building a life where they can stay bobcats in a safe, enriched sanctuary space. Climbing, stalking, watching storms roll through from a place where the ground is always just safe enough. Either way, this one snow day is part of that story.
Rowan is learning that being brave doesn't mean ignoring risk. It means meeting it with more information than you had the first time.
Willow is discovering that following at first doesn't disqualify you from leading later.
Tucker is starting to understand that being careful and even clumsy doesn't make you less of a wild heart.
For anyone watching who feels stuck in an old pattern, always rushing, always hanging back, always trying to look okay,
these 3 bobcats offer a gentle alternative. You can change your footing, even midwinter.
The sun has begun its slow slide down the sky now, painting longer shadows across the Snow Ridge yard. The cubs' tracks weave through the snow in loops and lines, telling the story of the day in a language of paw prints. There are messy patches where fear took over, smooth stretches where confidence grew, and somewhere in between, the point where fear tipped into joy without losing its memory. In the final part of this story, we're going to follow them back toward the enclosure, toward dry straw and the soft hum of the heat lamp. We'll see how this one day settles into their bodies as they sleep, and how it settles into Daniel's, and maybe into yours.
Before we go there, if you felt even a small tug to try something again in a calmer way, to revisit a snowdrift in your own life with better footing, you might want to tuck that
thought away. Maybe write down a single word for it if you feel like sharing later. For now, stay with the sound of small paws in soft snow and the sight of 3 bobcat cubs turning a frightening morning into a day they'll carry with them into every winter that comes after this one. By the time the light begins to thin over Snow Ridge, the yard looks like a story you can almost read from above. Tracks loop and cross and fade where the wind has brushed them softly. 3 small lives have written their first winter chapter in the snow, and now the day is ready to close its cover. Daniel knows when enough is enough. The air has that deeper chill that sneaks in after mid-afternoon in the Colorado foothills, the kind older folks can feel in their joints before the forecast says a word. He gives Rowan, Willow, and Tucker a few last minutes to wander the shallow corner of the yard, then calls them in with a low, familiar whistle. What happens next is simple, but it's the kind of simple that sticks. Willow goes first. She's quick to dart through the open door, paws grateful for the packed straw inside their enclosure. Tucker follows with a lumbering sort of flop, rolling once before he settles, as if every part of him has finally admitted it's tired. Daniel smiles, closes the distance, and for a moment, the camera catches only the warm yellow of the heat lamp, the rustle of straw, the soft sound of 3 bobcat cubs rearranging themselves into a tangle of fur. Then we see why this last part of the day matters so much. Rowan doesn't go all the way in. He pauses right at the threshold, one paw on a straw. One paw is still on cold concrete. His eyes drift back to the yard, to the places where snow still falls in quiet, silver threads under the fence line. The easy choice would be to sink into the bed and call it a day. Instead, Rowan turns, looks up at the door Daniel is starting to close, and lifts his paw. Tap. The sound is small but clear. He taps again. Tap. And one more time with just a bit more insistence. Tap. It's not frantic scratching. It's not fear. It's a bobcat cub asking, as plain as he knows how, "Are we really done? Is there just one more look?" Daniel stops, hand on the latch. For a heartbeat, You can hear the hum of the heater, the soft settling of the building, and nothing else. Then he laughs, quietly, the way you laugh when you've already made up your mind to say yes. He eases the door open a few inches. Cold air slips in, brushing his face. Rowan leans into the gap, not trying to escape, just stretching that one paw out into the night again. A single snowflake lands on his pads. He holds it there a second, then pulls back, satisfied in a way only he fully understands. There's something in that small gesture that feels bigger than the morning's slips and slides. Fear, play, stillness, and now this, curiosity that survived the scare and made it all the way to bedtime. That's what this one snow day has given him, not the absence of fear, but the courage to reach out anyway. The same is true, in quieter ways, for Willow and Tucker. Willow, who spent the early hours hiding behind footsteps, now sleeps with her body pressed just a little farther toward the door, as if she trusts the world on the other side a bit more. Tucker, who tried so hard to look sure of himself, has allowed tiredness to win. He sprawled where he fell, breathing deep, the kind of rest that only comes when you finally stop pretending you're not worn out. Daniel stands in the half-light, watching them, one hand on the frame. You can see the whole day written on his face. The early laughter, the spike of fear at the deep drift, the relief, the quiet. Somewhere underneath those expressions are the things you and I carry too. The doctor's note on his desk, the aging parent who needs a call, the bills stacked under the paperweight. They're all still there. But this snow day has threaded something else through them. Proof that even on the heavy days, life can hand you a moment so honest and silly and tender that it lights up the rest of the week. Maybe, watching from your own living room or kitchen table, you feel a trace of that. Maybe you recognize yourself in Rowan's stubborn little tap, in Willow's hesitant bravery, or in Tucker finally dropping the act and just resting where he lands. If you'd like, you can take one quiet minute after this ends and ask yourself a gentle question. Where in your own life is there a door you might tap on one more time? A small curiosity you've shelved, a bit of joy you set aside after a scare. There's no pressure to answer out loud. Just noticing the question is a start. If this bobcat snow adventure has made your day feel a little lighter, if it helped you breathe easier for a few minutes, I'd be grateful if you'd let the story keep traveling. You can tap your own version of Rowan's paw print by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on the bell so you can come back the next time a wild heart here meets something new. Snow, wind, spring, freedom. And if you feel moved to go a step further, to help rescue and heal wild animals like these bobcats in real life, your support truly matters. A warm super thanks or a small donation, whatever feels right, helps places like Snow Ridge keep the lights on, the heat lamps humming, and the doors open when another cardboard box appears at the edge of a road. For tonight, though, we'll leave Rowan, Willow, and Tucker where they are, curled together under soft light, snow whispering against the roof. One last paw print, still fresh on the threshold, and we'll carry a little of their wild, quiet courage back into our own lives.